Aliens laughed at the human girl's black cat until it took down a Warbeast in one leap. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the vastness of an interstellar embassy on Nexus Station, a lonely human diplomat clutched a small carrier to her chest, the soft meows from within drawing curious and judgmental stares from the alien delegates around her. Sarah Morgan adjusted her diplomatic uniform as she waited for the Galactic Council meeting to begin. At 28, she was the youngest human ambassador ever appointed to the Nexus Federation, a collection of 37 spacefaring civilizations that had been unified for centuries before humanity stumbled onto the galactic stage. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and glanced down at the carrier in her lap. "Shoo, Shadow. We'll be home soon," she whispered. A tall, avian being with iridescent feathers that shifted between purple and green leaned over from the seat beside her. Ambassador Krell of the Zathran Collective tilted his beaked head, his four eyes blinking in sequence. "You brought your non-sentient companion creature to a Level 1 diplomatic summit." Krell's translator conveyed his incredulity with perfect clarity. Sarah smiled politely. "Shadow is my emotional support animal. Under human diplomatic protocols, I'm permitted to have him with me." 3 seats away, a bulky reptilian delegate with armored skin and prominent tusks let out a rumbling laugh that sounded like rocks in a blender. Ambassador Drex of the Tauran Imperium was nearly twice Sarah's height, with muscle density 5 times that of the average human. "The humans require emotional stabilization from primitive pets," Drex announced loudly to the chamber. How charming and primitive. Sarah felt her cheeks flush but maintained her diplomatic smile. 6 months into her posting, she had grown accustomed to the casual condescension from older species. Humanity was the newest member of the Nexus Federation, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 43 years ago. To most of the delegates, humans were barely more than clever primates who had stumbled onto quantum physics. The carrier on her lap shuffled, and a sleek black head poked out through the partially unzipped opening. Shadow, her 3-year-old black cat, blinked his golden eyes at the chamber full of aliens. His tail twitched as he surveyed the room with typical feline assessment. "By the cosmic void," gasped a gelatinous delegate from a nearby hover platform. "Is that a Felis catus? Those primitive predators still exist on your world." Sarah stroked Shadow's head as he settled back into the carrier. "Cats have been our companions for thousands of years. They're highly intelligent and excellent judges of character." This provoked a ripple of what she recognized as alien laughter throughout the chamber. Even the typically stoic silicon-based Letharians seemed amused, their crystalline bodies vibrating at a frequency that indicated mirth. Ambassador Morgan came the deep, resonant voice of Council Elder Vex, a being composed primarily of sentient gas contained within an exostructure. "While we respect your species' cultural attachments, please ensure your companion remains contained during proceedings. The last thing we need is primitive instincts disrupting diplomatic relations." Sarah nodded respectfully. "Of course, Elder Vex. Shadow will remain in his carrier." The meeting proceeded with discussions about trade routes, resource allocations, and a territorial dispute between the Zathran Collective and the Meridian Alliance. Sarah contributed when human interests were involved, but mostly observed and took mental notes. As the newest species, humans were still proving their worth to the Nexus Federation. When the session broke for a recess, Sarah carried Shadow's carrier to the designated human quarters. The apartment assigned to her was modest by Federation standards, but contained Earth-normal gravity and atmosphere. As soon as she closed the door, she unzipped the carrier fully and Shadow leaped out, stretching languidly before exploring the room. "Sorry about that, buddy. You'd think a galactic civilization would be more impressed by one of Earth's most successful predators," she said, filling his water bowl. Shadow meowed in response, rubbing against her legs before settling on a cushioned window ledge overlooking the vast central atrium of Nexus Station. Outside, various species mingled in the artificial gravity, some floating, others crawling along specialized pathways on the walls. Sarah's communication panel chimed. A holographic display appeared above her desk, showing the face of her human colleague, Ryan Mitchell, the security attaché for the human delegation. "How was the first session?" he asked, his expression tense. "The usual." They laughed at Shadow. Drex made some comments about primitive humans. "Nothing new." Sarah sighed, removing her formal diplomatic jacket. Ryan's expression darkened. "Listen, Sarah, I'm picking up some unusual communications chatter. The Taurans are unusually active in the security channels. Something's happening, but I can't get clearance to find out what." Sarah frowned. The Tauran Imperium had been the most vocal opponent to human inclusion in the Federation. They controlled significant mining operations and systems adjacent to human space and had historically been territorial. "Keep monitoring it. I'll see if I can get anything from Krell. He's been more cordial lately." After signing off, Sarah changed into a less formal outfit and prepared for the evening reception. These social gatherings were often where the real diplomacy happened. She hesitated, looking at Shadow, who was now grooming himself on her bed. "What do you think, Shadow? Should I leave you here or bring you to the party?" The cat stared at her with those intelligent golden eyes, then deliberately walked back to his carrier and sat beside it. Sarah laughed. "All right, social butterfly. Let's go scandalize some more diplomats." The grand reception hall of Nexus Station was a marvel of alien architecture. The ceilings stretched up over 30 meters, with gravity-defying fountains sending streams of luminescent fluid in complex patterns overhead. Beings from across the galaxy mingled, some requiring specialized environmental suits, others floating naturally in the air. Sarah entered with Shadow's carrier, immediately drawing attention. She had learned early in her diplomatic career that sometimes leaning into one's differences was more effective than trying to blend in. If they were going to see her as the strange human with the primitive pet, she might as well own it. Ambassador Krell approached, his feathers now a calm blue shade indicating curiosity or possibly politeness. "Ambassador Morgan, I see your companion joins us again." Sarah smiled. "Shadow enjoys new experiences. May I?" She gestured to the carrier. Krell made a gesture of assent with his upper limbs. Sarah unzipped the carrier partway, and Shadow poked his head out, studying Krell with interest. "Fascinating creature," Krell said, bending slightly to observe the cat more closely. "Our records indicate these animals once hunted independently, but chose to associate with humans for mutual benefit. An unusual evolutionary path. Cats domesticated themselves," Sarah explained. "They decided humans were useful and moved in. Some anthropologists believe they've been manipulating us ever since." This seemed to intrigue Krell, perhaps more sophisticated than initial assessment suggested. "May I?" He extended a feathered appendage slowly. Shadow sniffed cautiously, then allowed Krell to gently stroke his head. The avian diplomat's eyes widened slightly. "The texture is pleasing, and it produces a rhythmic vibration. We call that purring. It means he's content." Their moment of cultural exchange was interrupted by the heavy footfalls of Ambassador Drex, who approached with several other Tauran officials. "Still showcasing your primitive creature, Ambassador Morgan?" Drex's voice boomed, causing several nearby delegates to turn. "Perhaps next summit you'll bring some soil microbes to introduce as your evolutionary ancestors." The Taurans with him rumbled with laughter. Sarah felt Shadow tense slightly under her hand. "Each species has its evolutionary journey, Ambassador Drex," she replied diplomatically. "Humans have learned much from our animal companions throughout history. Shadow here can sense threats and emotions in ways I cannot." Drex snorted, a sound like escaping steam. "Sense threats? What threats could your pet possibly detect that our advanced security systems cannot?" "The creature is decorative at best, a security risk at worst." One of the junior Tauran officials leaned closer, peering at Shadow with 4 yellow eyes. "Is it dangerous?" "Our records indicate these creatures were predators. Domestic cats weigh about 4 to 5 kilograms, Sarah explained. "They're hardly a threat to anyone here." This provoked more rumbling laughter from the Tauran delegation. "The human speaks truth for once," Drex announced loudly. "Their companion predators are as harmless as the humans themselves." Neither has evolved the strength, technology, or will to be truly formidable. Sarah maintained her diplomatic smile while silently counting to 10. Shadow, however, fixed his golden eyes on Drex with the unmistakable intensity of a predator assessing potential prey. The cat's tail swished once, deliberately. Krell, perhaps sensing the tension, intervened. The reception includes representatives from the Meridian Alliance. I believe they expressed interest in human agricultural methods, Ambassador Morgan. Perhaps I could introduce you? Grateful for the diplomat's tact, Sarah nodded. I'd appreciate that, Ambassador Krell. As they moved away from the Tauran delegation, Krell spoke quietly. The Taurans respect only strength and territory. It is their evolutionary nature as apex predators. Do not take their dismissal personally. Thank you for the cultural context, Sarah replied. And for the timely extraction. One develops certain skills after 3 centuries of diplomacy, Krell said, his feathers rippling with what Sarah had learned was amusement. The Taurans are particularly active today. Their security personnel have been conducting unusual scans throughout the station. Sarah felt a prickle of concern, remembering Ryan's warning. Do you know why? Rumors only. Something about a security demonstration during tomorrow's session. Krell's head tilted. But I have served with Drex for 60 years. He enjoys dramatic displays of Tauran superiority. The conversation shifted as they joined a group of Meridian delegates, ethereal beings who existed partially in another dimension. Their translucent forms shimmered as they discussed potential trade agreements with Earth. Shadow remained calm in his carrier, occasionally observing the proceedings with serene feline indifference. Hours later, as the reception wound down, Sarah's communication panel vibrated discreetly. She excused herself to check the message from Ryan. Security alert. Meet me at Hub 9, Level 16. Now, bring Shadow. The urgency in the message was unusual. Sarah quickly made her way through the labyrinthine corridors of Nexus Station, Shadow secure in his carrier. Hub 9 was a secondary communication center, less frequented during the evening cycle. Ryan was waiting, his expression grim. As the station's security attaché, he had access to certain monitoring systems, though his clearance was limited compared to the established species security personnel. What's happening? Sarah asked as soon as they were alone. The Taurans have brought something onto the station, Ryan said, lowering his voice despite the empty corridor. Something biological that bypassed quarantine protocols. Sarah felt a chill. Biological quarantine was one of the most strictly enforced regulations in the Federation. How do you know? I've been monitoring their communications since you mentioned Drex's behavior. They're using coded language, but I picked up mentions of demonstration specimen and combat capability assessment. Ryan ran a hand through his short brown hair. And they've been asking questions about Earth's gravity and atmospheric conditions. You think they're planning something against the human delegation? I don't know. But the Taurans have opposed our membership from the beginning, and with the resource rights in the Proxima system coming up for vote next week. Ryan left the implication hanging. Sarah considered the information. We need more intelligence before we make any accusations. The last thing we need is to create a diplomatic incident based on speculation. That's why I called you here. Ryan activated a holographic display. This is the security layout for the council chambers. The Taurans have requested a special presentation period tomorrow. They've been granted access to the central platform. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of the Grand Council chamber, with highlighted areas indicating security measures. Ryan pointed to several spots. They've also requested modifications to the atmospheric settings in the chamber. Officially, it's to accommodate some specific delegates, but the parameters they've requested match Earth normal conditions almost exactly. Sarah frowned, stroking Shadow through the carrier mesh. The cat had been unusually alert since they entered the hub, his ears forward and eyes focused. Have you reported this to Federation security? Ryan shook his head. With what evidence? That the Taurans are acting suspicious? They've got allies among the senior security staff. Without concrete proof, we'd just be the paranoid newcomers. Sarah nodded, understanding the precarious position. Humanity was still proving itself worthy of Federation membership. False accusations could set back decades of diplomatic progress. We need to be prepared without being provocative, she decided. I want you to quietly alert our delegation to be on heightened awareness tomorrow. I'll try to speak with Elder Vex before the session begins. And what about Shadow? Ryan asked, glancing at the carrier. Sarah looked down at her cat, who stared back with those intelligent golden eyes. He goes where I go? Federation protocols allow it. And at this point, removing him might draw more attention. As they prepared to leave, the lights in the hub suddenly dimmed, switching to emergency protocols. A moment later, they returned to normal. Power fluctuation? Sarah suggested. Ryan frowned, checking his device. No scheduled maintenance. And it only affected this sector. He tapped rapidly on his console. Someone's accessing the environmental controls for the main council chamber. Testing systems. At this hour? Exactly. Sarah made a decision. Keep monitoring. I'm going to do some diplomatic mingling before tomorrow's session. Sometimes the best intelligence comes from casual conversations. As she left, Shadow made a low growling sound in his carrier, something she rarely heard from her normally composed companion. I know, buddy, she whispered. Something doesn't feel right to me either. Sarah's quarters were quiet when she returned. She released Shadow, who immediately began a thorough inspection of every corner of the apartment, behavior she recognized from when he sensed something amiss. What is it? She asked, watching him prowl. You feel it too, don't you? She accessed her secure terminal, reviewing the agenda for tomorrow's council session. The Tauran presentation was scheduled immediately after the opening formalities. The description was vague, demonstration of security protocols and species capabilities relevant to ongoing resource negotiations. Sarah sent a message to Krell, using the casual diplomatic channel rather than the official communication system. Curious about tomorrow's Tauran presentation. Any insights you can share? Cultural context would be appreciated. While waiting for a response, she prepared for bed, her mind running through various scenarios. The Taurans were militaristic and proud, known for displays of strength rather than subtlety. Whatever they planned would likely be dramatic rather than covert. Her communication panel chimed. Krell had responded. Traditional Tauran demonstrations involve showcasing their bioengineered achievements. Their warrior culture values biological superiority. Exercise caution. Some previous demonstrations have been provocative. Sarah frowned, glancing at Shadow, who had finally settled on the foot of her bed, still alert. What are you planning, Drex? She murmured to herself. That night, her sleep was fitful, filled with dreams of massive shadowy creatures and golden eyes watching from the darkness. She woke before the station's artificial dawn cycle, Shadow already awake and sitting at attention beside her bed. Ready for another day of interstellar diplomacy? She asked, scratching behind his ears. The cat meowed once, distinctly, and moved to sit beside his carrier. The council chamber was already filling when Sarah arrived the next morning. She wore her formal diplomatic uniform, Earth's blue and silver colors prominently displayed. Shadow's carrier was secured with its special diplomatic clearance tag. Ryan intercepted her near the entrance, keeping his voice low. The Taurans brought in equipment during the night cycle. Security cleared, but the manifests were sealed under council authority. Elder Vex authorized it, along with representatives from the Zathran and Meridian delegations. Whatever they're planning has high-level approval. Sarah nodded, processing this information. Stay alert. Keep our security personnel informed but discreet. Inside the chamber, Sarah noticed the Tauran delegation was larger than usual. Drex sat with 6 other representatives, all wearing ceremonial armor that accentuated their massive physical presence. At the center of the chamber, the usual presentation platform had been modified, now surrounded by a barely visible energy field. Sarah took her assigned seat, placing Shadow's carrier carefully beside her. The cat was unusually still inside, his attention focused entirely on the central platform. Krell arrived shortly after, his feathers a muted gray that Sarah had learned indicated concern. Ambassador Morgan, he greeted formally, then lowered his voice. The Taurans have brought a Krivith to the station. Sarah maintained her diplomatic composure while her mind raced. I'm not familiar with that term. A bioengineered combat beast. They use them for planetary defense and high-profile security. They're normally forbidden on diplomatic stations due to their aggressive nature. Krell's feathers rippled with agitation. This is most irregular. Before Sarah could respond, the chamber lights dimmed. An Elder Vex platform moved to the center of the room, signaling the start of the session. Representatives of the Nexus Federation, Elder Vex began, his voice resonating through the chamber. Before we continue with our scheduled deliberations, the Tauran Imperium has requested a special demonstration relevant to our upcoming security protocols discussion. Sarah felt a knot forming in her stomach. Beside her, Shadow had gone completely still in his carrier, a predator's stillness that she recognized from when he hunted. Ambassador Drex, you have the chamber, Elder Vex announced, moving his platform to the side. Drex rose to his full imposing height, his armored hide catching the light as he moved to the central platform. Esteemed colleagues, his rumbling voice projected confidence. As we prepare to vote on the resource rights for frontier systems, including those adjacent to human space, the Imperium believes it is important to demonstrate the security capabilities that each species brings to our collective defense. Sarah exchanged a glance with Ryan, who had positioned himself near the human delegation's security detail. The frontier requires strength, Drex continued, the ability to defend against unknown threats. Today, we will demonstrate the Tauran contribution to Federation security. He made a gesture, and a section of the chamber floor slid open. From below, a massive containment unit rose into view. It was at least 3 meters tall, constructed of some opaque material that obscured its contents. The energy field around the platform intensified visibly. Behold, Drex announced with evident pride, a juvenile Krivith Warbeast, the front line of Tauran planetary defense. He pressed a control, and the containment unit's sides retracted, revealing the creature within. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The beast was massive, easily the size of a small shuttlecraft. Its body was reptilian but clearly bioengineered, with multiple limbs ending in curved talons. Armored plates covered vital areas, and its elongated head featured multiple rows of serrated teeth. Most disturbingly, its 6 eyes moved independently, scanning the chamber with predatory intelligence. The Krivith is genetically programmed for loyalty to Tauran handlers and aggression toward identified threats, Drex explained. Its sensory capabilities can detect movement through solid barriers and identify specific biological signatures. Sarah felt her heart racing. The beast's presence here couldn't be coincidental, not with the upcoming vote on territories bordering human space. Drex turned, his yellow eyes finding Sarah in the audience. Perhaps our newest Federation members would like to demonstrate their own security capabilities? A comparison would be educational. The challenge was clear. The Taurans were showcasing their biological superiority, highlighting humanity's relative weakness. Sarah felt the eyes of the entire chamber upon her. Shadow suddenly moved in his carrier, letting out a low, warning growl that she had never heard before. The sound was primal, ancient, a predator recognizing another predator. And somehow, impossibly, the massive Krivith heard it. The beast's head swiveled, all 6 eyes focusing directly on Sarah's position. It made a sound, halfway between a hiss and a roar, rising to its full height within the energy containment field. It seems your companion animal recognizes superior predatory evolution, Ambassador Morgan, Drex said, his voice laden with smug satisfaction. Perhaps it would like a closer look? Without warning, he adjusted the controls. The energy field flickered, not disappearing but changing configuration. A small section directly in front of Sarah's position dimmed. And in that moment, the Krivith moved with terrifying speed. It lunged forward, pressing against the weakened section of the field, its massive head stretching toward the human delegation. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates scattered, security alerts blared, and Elder Vex's voice boomed commands to restore full containment. But Sarah remained frozen in place, watching as the beast focused entirely on her position, its multiple eyes filled with predatory intent. The energy field strained but held, containing the creature's body while allowing its head to extend partially through the compromised section. It was still meters away from her position, but the message was clear. The beast could reach her if the field failed completely. A minor calibration error, Drex announced, though his expression suggested otherwise. The Krivith merely responds to the primitive predator scent from the human's pet. Rest assured, the containment field is secure. Sarah felt a surge of anger cutting through her fear. This was a deliberate intimidation tactic, using the beast to demonstrate humanity's vulnerability. The political message was unmistakable. How could humans protect frontier territories when they couldn't even protect themselves? Beside her, Shadow had gone completely still. Then, as Sarah watched in disbelief, her cat deliberately pushed against the carrier zipper, forcing it open just enough to slip through. "Shadow, no," she whispered urgently, reaching for him. But the black cat evaded her grasp with typical feline grace. In one fluid motion, Shadow leaped from the carrier onto the council chamber floor, his golden eyes fixed on the massive Warbeast that was still straining against the energy field. The chamber fell silent as the small black cat stood before the massive bioengineered predator, his tail straight up, back arched, showing not fear, but a territorial challenge that transcended species. The council chamber had fallen into a stunned silence. The imposing Krivith Warbeast, with its 6 predatory eyes and massive jaws, strained against the energy containment field while staring down at the small black cat, standing defiantly before it. The contrast was almost comical. A 4-kilogram Earth feline facing off against a bioengineered monster 20 times its size. "Shadow," Sarah called out, her diplomatic training momentarily forgotten in her concern for her companion. Ambassador Drex let out a rumbling laugh. "Your primitive pet appears to have a death wish, Ambassador Morgan. Perhaps it doesn't recognize true predatory superiority." Several Federation security officers were moving toward the confrontation, but they hesitated, unwilling to approach the partially contained Krivith. Elder Vex's gaseous form pulsed with what Sarah recognized as agitation. "Ambassador Drex, restore full containment immediately," the Elder commanded. "A minor demonstration only," Drex replied smoothly. "The containment field is secure. The beast merely wishes to inspect the human's pet more closely." The Krivith let out a hissing roar that echoed through the chamber, causing several delegates to retreat further. Its clawed appendages scratched against the energy field, creating visible distortions where it pushed. And still Shadow stood his ground, golden eyes fixed on the monster, tail lashing slowly from side to side. "I suggest you retrieve your animal, Ambassador Morgan," Krell said quietly beside her. The Krivith's focus appears fixed on it. Sarah stood, intending to approach Shadow, but Ryan caught her arm. "Wait," he whispered. "Look at the containment field." Sarah watched as the energy barrier fluctuated where the Krivith pressed against it. The calibration error Drex had mentioned appeared to be expanding, the field growing noticeably weaker with each push from the Warbeast. "This is deliberate," Sarah realized aloud. "They're going to let it through." The political calculation was suddenly clear. If the Krivith accidentally escaped and harmed the human delegation, or even just destroyed her pet, it would demonstrate humanity's vulnerability. The upcoming vote on frontier territories would swing to the torrents. Any human complaints would be dismissed as the whining of a species too weak to protect itself. Shadow suddenly emitted a low, rumbling growl that seemed impossible from his small frame. The sound was ancient, primal, a sound that would have been recognized by prehistoric humans huddled around fires as early cats protected their grain stores from larger predators. The Krivith paused, its multiple eyes blinking in sequence. For the briefest moment, the massive creature appeared confused by the small predator's lack of fear. Then several things happened in rapid succession. The energy field fluctuated dramatically, creating a larger opening. The Krivith lunged forward, its massive head and one clawed limb pushing through the gap. Drex made a show of alarm, pressing controls ostensibly to restore containment, but Sarah could see the calculated satisfaction in his expression. And Shadow, small, ordinary Shadow, moved. Later, security recordings would be analyzed frame by frame, but even slowed down, the cat's movement was almost too fast to track. Shadow didn't retreat or dodge. Instead, he leaped directly toward the Warbeast's face, becoming a black blur of motion. Sarah gasped as her pet seemed to fly suicidally toward the monster's jaws. But at the last possible moment, Shadow twisted in midair with impossible agility, avoiding the snapping teeth while landing precisely on the junction between the Krivith's head and its armored neck. The Warbeast thrashed, trying to dislodge the cat, but Shadow dug in with his claws, maintaining his position with the tenacity that had made felines such successful predators on Earth. Then, with deliberate precision, Shadow bit down at exactly the right spot, a small gap in the creature's armored plates that protected a nerve cluster. The effect was immediate and shocking. The massive Krivith convulsed, its 6 eyes rolling back, and emitted a shriek that caused the chamber's sound dampeners to activate automatically. The Warbeast's limbs thrashed wildly, crashing against the energy field and creating cascading failures throughout the containment system. Impossible, Drex bellowed, frantically working the controls. The beast's neural protection should prevent. The Krivith collapsed half in and half out of the containment area, its massive bulk now completely still except for sporadic twitches. And atop the fallen monster, Shadow sat calmly grooming his paw as if he'd done nothing more remarkable than knock over a houseplant. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Security personnel rushed forward, delegates demanded explanations, and Elder Vex's normally composed forms swirled with agitation. In the confusion, Sarah moved quickly to retrieve Shadow, who allowed himself to be gathered into her arms with typical feline nonchalance. "What just happened?" Ryan asked, joining her as she retreated from the central platform with Shadow purring in her arms. "I think my cat just took down their Warbeast," Sarah replied, still processing the reality of what she'd witnessed. Krell approached, his feathers now a vibrant purple that indicated excitement or amazement. "Your companion animal possesses combat capabilities you failed to disclose, Ambassador Morgan." Sarah looked down at Shadow, who blinked slowly up at her with those intelligent golden eyes. "Honestly, Ambassador Krell, I had no idea he could do that." Drex's roar of outrage cut through the chamber's noise. This was a planned attack. The human's creature has been bioengineered as an assassination tool. Elder Vex's platform moved to hover between the Tauran delegation and Sarah. "A serious accusation, Ambassador Drex. Particularly given that it was your demonstration that created this situation." "The containment field malfunctioned," Drex insisted, though his yellow eyes betrayed his lie. "And the human's creature exploited the vulnerability." "Indeed it did," came a new voice. The Letharian representative, a crystalline being rarely involved in heated debates, moved forward. With remarkable efficiency, security personnel had surrounded the fallen Krivith, scanning it with various devices. One of them, a multi-limbed Arconian, looked up from a diagnostic tool. "The creature lives, but is in a state of complete neural shutdown. No permanent damage detected." Sarah felt Shadow shift in her arms, his attention focused on the security team examining the Krivith. She realized with a start that his attack had been precisely calibrated, not to kill, but to incapacitate. "I demand an investigation," Drex thundered. "The human has introduced a dangerous weapon into the council chamber." "An interesting perspective," Krell remarked, his translator conveying dry amusement. "Given that you introduced a war beast designed for planetary assault." Elder Vex's gaseous form contracted, indicating a formal pronouncement. "There will indeed be an investigation, Ambassador Drex. Beginning with the authorization you received to bring a Class 3 bioweapon onto a diplomatic station and the mysterious malfunction of its containment field." The Tauran ambassador's protests faded as Federation security officers escorted him and his delegation from the chamber. The Krivith was secured in a more robust containment unit and removed for examination. As the chaos subsided, Delegates began approaching Sarah, not with the usual condescension, but with newfound interest and respect. Your Felis Catus neutralized a Krivith Warbeast. The gelatinous delegate who had earlier mocked Shadow now bubbled with excitement. A creature 1/20th its size defeated Tauran military bioengineering. Is this capability common among Earth felines? Asked a Meridian representative, their translucent form shimmering with curiosity. Sarah found herself at the center of a crowd of aliens suddenly very interested in Earth's primitive companion animals. Shadow, for his part, had settled comfortably in her arms, accepting the attention with typical feline entitlement. Domestic cats are predators, Sarah explained, thinking quickly. They've evolved over millions of years to be efficient hunters with excellent problem-solving abilities. They can identify vulnerabilities and strike with precision. This wasn't entirely untrue. Earth cats were indeed remarkable predators for their size. What Sarah couldn't explain, because she didn't understand it herself, was how Shadow had known exactly where to strike a completely alien species to neutralize it so effectively. A diplomatic reception will be held in your quarters this evening, Ambassador Morgan, Elder Vex announced, his gaseous form now a placid blue. The Council wishes to discuss Earth's unique security assets in more detail. As the chamber cleared, Ryan approached Sarah again, his expression bewildered. I've had Shadow at my apartment for cat-sitting. He chases laser pointers and sleeps on laundry. How did he take down a Warbeast? Sarah shook her head, stroking Shadow's silky fur. I have no idea, but I think we just gained significant diplomatic leverage. 2 hours later, in the privacy of her quarters, Sarah sat at her desk, composing an urgent message to Earth's diplomatic headquarters. Shadow was perched on the windowsill, watching the station traffic with serene feline interest, as if the morning's events had been nothing unusual. Shadow, Sarah said, turning from her terminal. What exactly are you? The black cat blinked slowly at her, then leaped gracefully to the floor and padded over to rub against her legs, purring loudly. A chime announced a visitor. Sarah opened the door to find Ambassador Krell waiting, his feathers now a diplomatic shade of formal blue. Ambassador Morgan, may I enter? I wish to speak privately before this evening's reception. Sarah gestured him inside. Shadow immediately approached the avian diplomat, rubbing against his lower limbs in greeting. Krell bent slightly, extending a feathered appendage to stroke the cat with evident fascination. Your companion continues to surprise, he remarked. Few beings approach me so directly. Most find my species intimidating. Cats don't intimidate easily, Sarah replied, offering Krell a seat designed for his unique physiology. What can I do for you, Ambassador? Krell settled, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence before focusing on her. I came to offer context for today's events. The Taurans have been planning this demonstration for some time. It was designed specifically to embarrass the human delegation before the frontier territories vote. I suspected as much. The containment field malfunction was deliberate. Of course, Krell's feathers rippled with confirmation. The Krivith was programmed to eliminate your companion animal and possibly cause minor injuries to your delegation. Nothing fatal. The Taurans are not fools, but enough to demonstrate human vulnerability. Sarah felt a cold anger at the calculation behind the plan, and the Council allowed this. Not exactly. The demonstration was approved, but not the malfunction. The Taurans have allies among certain Federation species who share their concerns about human expansion. Krell's voice lowered. What no one anticipated was your companion's capabilities. Shadow had returned to the windowsill, seemingly ignoring their conversation while his tail twitched occasionally. To be honest, Ambassador Krell, neither did I. The avian diplomat's head tilted in a gesture Sarah had learned indicated skepticism. You expect me to believe Earth sends diplomats with combat-capable companions without briefing them? Sarah considered her response carefully. This was a pivotal diplomatic moment. The truth, that she had no idea how her ordinary housecat had neutralized an alien Warbeast, might make Earth seem either deceptive or incompetent. Neither would help humanity's standing. Ambassador Krell, how long have your people been part of the Federation? The Zathran Collective joined over 6 centuries ago, he replied. Humanity achieved faster than light travel less than 50 years ago. We're still learning the rules of interstellar diplomacy. Sarah glanced at Shadow. But we've survived on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years, developing relationships with various species along the way. Some of those relationships have unexpected depths. It wasn't exactly a lie. She truly didn't know how Shadow had done what he did. But her answer implied a deeper human strategy without claiming one outright. Krell studied her for a long moment, then made a gesture of acceptance. A diplomatic answer. I would expect nothing less. His feathers shifted to a more informal pattern. But between colleagues, was it planned? Sarah smiled. Let's just say Earth species have evolved together for millions of years. We understand each other in ways that might not be immediately apparent to outside observers. The avian diplomat rose to leave. The Tauran delegation has filed a formal protest, but it will go nowhere. Their attempt to manipulate the containment field has been verified by security recordings. He paused at the door. The Frontier Territories vote will proceed next week. I suspect you will find significantly more support for the human position now. After Krell departed, Sarah sat beside Shadow on the window ledge, watching the streams of traffic moving through Nexus Station's central atrium. You've single-handedly changed humanity's standing in the Federation, she told the cat, scratching under his chin. Care to tell me how you knew exactly where to bite that thing? Shadow purred in response, pressing his head against her hand with typical feline affection. A few hours later, as Sarah prepared for the diplomatic reception, her communication panel chimed with a priority message from Earth. It was from the director of Xenodiplomatic Relations himself, marked urgent. Ambassador Morgan, we've received your preliminary report regarding the incident with the Tauran Warbeast. First, congratulations on this unexpected diplomatic victory. Second, please implement Protocol Whisker immediately. Your companion animal is to be given diplomatic protection status, and all medical data is to be routed directly to our Xenobiology division. Further instructions will follow after the security team arrives within 48 hours. Until then, maintain the position that this capability is standard for Earth felines. Director Harrington out. Sarah stared at the message, then at Shadow, who was now grooming himself on her bed with methodical focus. Protocol Whisker, she murmured. They already have a protocol for this. The reception that evening was unlike any diplomatic function Sarah had attended in her 6 months on Nexus Station. Her quarters, though modest by Federation standards, were filled with representatives from virtually every spacefaring species. The focus of attention, of course, was Shadow, who accepted the adulation with regal feline grace. The Felis catus exhibits remarkable environmental adaptation, observed a Meridian scientist, their translucent form hovering near where Shadow perched on a cushion. Our preliminary analysis suggests specialized neural connections unlike any we've documented. On Earth, cats have been companion animals for thousands of years, Sarah explained to the gathered delegates. They were originally valued for their ability to eliminate pests and protect food stores. And now they eliminate Krivith Warbeasts, remarked a silicon-based Letharian, their crystalline body vibrating with what might have been humor. Perhaps the Taurans should reconsider their bioengineering priorities. Ambassador Drex was notably absent from the reception, having been confined to quarters pending the investigation into the containment field malfunction. The other Tauran delegates maintained a formal diplomatic presence but stayed at the edges of the gathering. Elder Vex arrived midway through the reception, his gaseous form contained in an ornate exostructure rarely seen outside formal council sessions. Ambassador Morgan, the Elder's resonant voice carried through the room. The Council has reviewed the security recordings of today's incident. The Tauran demonstration was unauthorized in its execution, and Ambassador Drex will be recalled for consultation with his government. This was a significant diplomatic victory. Being recalled for consultation was the Federation equivalent of being fired in disgrace. The Council also wishes to formally acknowledge the unexpected capabilities demonstrated by your companion species, Elder Vex continued. We would be interested in discussing potential security cooperation involving Earth's Felis Catus population. Sarah maintained her diplomatic composure while inwardly marveling at how quickly the Federation's perspective had shifted. Yesterday, humans were barely tolerated newcomers with primitive pets. Today, those same pets were being considered for security operations. Earth would be pleased to discuss such possibilities, Elder Vex, she replied smoothly. Though I should note that cats are independent beings with their own preferences. They choose their human companions rather than the reverse. This statement caused a ripple of interest among the delegates. The concept of a non-sentient species choosing its associations contradicted the hierarchical assumptions many Federation species held about companion animals. As the reception continued, Ryan managed to speak privately with Sarah near the refreshment area. Security just intercepted a Tauran transmission, he murmured. They're in a complete panic about Shadow. Apparently, the Krivith was their most advanced combat bioengineering, developed over centuries. The fact that an Earth housecat neutralized it has sent shockwaves through their military. Sarah glanced across the room where Shadow was allowing a fascinated Arconian to scan him with a non-invasive medical device. Did you see the message from Earth? Protocol Whisker? They're sending a security team. Ryan nodded. Received the same notification. Apparently, there's been a classified research program studying domestic cats for decades. Something about anomalous neurological patterns and unexplained abilities. You're saying Earth knew cats could do whatever Shadow did today? Not exactly, but they suspected our furry friends might be more than they appear. Ryan sipped his drink. Think about it. Cats have lived alongside humans for thousands of years, but we still don't fully understand them. They sleep 18 hours a day, yet somehow always know when something important is happening. They can find their way home over impossible distances. They predict earthquakes, sense illness. Sarah looked at Shadow with new eyes. Her ordinary pet, adopted from a shelter 3 years ago, had fundamentally altered humanity's position in galactic politics with a single, precisely calculated leap. The reception began winding down as the station's cycle shifted toward night. As the last delegates departed, Krell lingered, his feathers now a relaxed shade of purple. A successful evening, Ambassador Morgan. Your position in the upcoming vote is considerably strengthened. Thanks to Shadow, Sarah replied honestly. Krell's head tilted as he studied the cat, who was now curled on a cushion, apparently asleep. I've accessed Earth's historical database. Your species has interesting myths about these creatures. In ancient Egypt, they were worshipped as divine beings. In medieval Europe, they were believed to see beyond the physical world. Just myths, Sarah said automatically. Are they? Krell's feathers rippled. My species has a saying. Truth hides in plain sight across 1,000 worlds. Perhaps your ancestors understood something about these creatures that your modern science has forgotten. After the avian diplomat departed, Sarah sat beside the sleeping Shadow, gently stroking his glossy fur. What are you really? She whispered. And how many more of you are there on Earth? Shadow opened one golden eye, regarding her with that inscrutable feline gaze that had remained unchanged through thousands of years of domestication. Then he stretched, yawned, and settled back into sleep, the very picture of an ordinary house cat. 1 week later, the Federation Council voted overwhelmingly to grant Earth rights to the contested frontier territories. The Tauran objections were noted but dismissed. Ambassador Drex had been replaced by a more moderate representative who spoke of cooperation rather than competition. In her private quarters, Sarah read the latest classified update from Earth. The security team had conducted extensive non-invasive scans of Shadow and found nothing that explained his ability to neutralize the Krivith. Physically, he was an ordinary 3-year-old domestic shorthair. Yet somehow, he had identified and exploited a vulnerability in an alien Warbeast he had never encountered before. Protocol Whisker had been expanded. Earth was now quietly documenting unusual feline behaviors worldwide, cataloging incidents that had previously been dismissed as coincidence or exaggeration. The diplomatic corps was subtly incorporating cats into more delegations, presenting them as cultural necessities while observing their interactions with alien species. Shadow sat on her desk, watching as she read the report. When she finished, he placed his paw precisely on the delete function, erasing the classified document from her terminal. Sarah stared at him. "You understand what we're doing, don't you?" The cat blinked slowly, then leaped into her lap, purring loudly. Sarah laughed, scratching behind his ears. "You know, the ancient Egyptians believed cats were guardians protecting humanity from forces we couldn't see or understand. Maybe they weren't so far off." Outside her window, the vast expanse of Nexus Station hummed with activity. Beings from across the galaxy went about their business, many now glancing with newfound respect at the human delegation's quarters. Within those quarters, a young diplomat and a small black cat prepared for another day of interstellar diplomacy, their partnership now a subject of fascination throughout the Federation. As Sarah donned her formal uniform, Shadow waited patiently by his diplomatic carrier, his golden eyes tracking her movements. When she was ready, he stepped inside without prompting, settling comfortably for the journey to the council chamber. "Ready to reshape interstellar politics again today?" Sarah asked with a smile. Shadow meowed once, distinctly, a sound that somehow conveyed complete confidence. In the grand scheme of the universe, Earth was still a newcomer, humanity still finding its place among the stars. But they weren't alone. They had never been alone. Patting softly beside them on velvet paws, watching with ancient golden eyes, their oldest companions had been preparing for this moment all along. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.